Hello everybody and welcome back to Middle-earth. This is Count MRVHS with another 4th Age guide for you today. We are looking at the Principality of Harondor. This is a faction that lies right here in between Gondor and Umbar, basically, and the other regions of Harad. And for a long time, this mod had a reputation, this faction had a reputation as being the most difficult faction to play in the 4th Age Total War. And I think that reputation was justified, although in the current version, I do think it's a bit easier. However, there are some pitfalls, some potential strategic traps that you might fall into, so I want to talk about that today. We're going to start off by going right to the initial setup of the campaign before anything happens. 4th Age 356, our start date. Now, as I said in the battle video, this is a faction that takes notes from both the north and the south, that is from Dunedainic as well as Haradrian factions. It is classified as a Haradrian faction in terms of its culture, but as you can see, we've got a good set of starting settlements here. We've got 5, and this seems to be a pretty good starting position if you look at the defensible nature of it. We've got 2 rivers. To the north, the River Poros; to the south, the Harnon. Each of those with just 1 crossing. So the good news is your realm is very defensible in the early game. You've got settlements that are very unlikely to come under attack early on, especially these 2, Lond New Elanath, Harad Lond, and Harngon is well isolated. These 2 are a bit more vulnerable. Harman is vulnerable, of course, to attack from the north, from the Dunedainic factions, and Rad Harnan, as you can tell, has a fairly threatening Haradrian army right next to it. Let's just get a little closer here so we can take a look at what this has. And it's got Mumakil. So if you've ever played 4th Age, you know what you're in for here. This is a pretty intimidating stack to face early on. The good news, though, is that you don't necessarily need to face this at all in the early stage. And from the save that I'm going to look at in a couple of minutes, we're going to go to a campaign already in progress with Harondor. I never fought this stack. Usually, if you just kind of hold back for a little while, this army of Harad will just march off east, and they'll try to conquer some rebel provinces over here, and you may never end up fighting those Mumakil. So that's what I would recommend. Don't start trouble with Harad in the early game. Let's take a look at the diplomacy, though. You start off with 1 strong ally in the Principality of Far Harad. This is a military access situation. Theoretically, you have trade rights with them. However, you don't have the actual ability to trade. I'm going to sort of toggle the fog of war here. Oops. And what we're going to do is take a look at really how far away all these other factions are. So Far Harad is down here. They start off with just 3 settlements. These 3 right along the bottom of the map. And they are in a pretty precarious situation themselves. So it's good that they're there as an ally, I suppose. Having allies does improve the authority stat of your faction leader, so it's good to have them if for no other reason than that. And it's very likely that the 2 of you will come to blows with Harad fairly quickly in the game, especially if you follow the guide recommendations that I'm going to talk about here shortly. So what are those recommendations? What are those pitfalls that you might face? Well, to our south, of course, we have the Empire of Harad. And for many players, you may think, okay, these settlements don't look super rich. They're pretty far apart. And we've got a nice defensible ford here. Let's just park an army on this, and we'll trade with Harad, maybe try to ally with them, and focus on the richer settlements to the north. And it is true that these settlements, if you go north early, take Thilian minus Honor, and all along the coasts here, you're going to be in a very strong position financially. But the problem with that is all of these settlements are of a different culture than yours. It's going to be harder for you to build them up and more difficult for you to eventually get money out of them. So this is going to be a long slog. The other thing is, if you go north too early, you're potentially missing out on a fairly decent ally and trade partner in the early game, because your ports here can all trade with all of these ports along the southern coast of Gondor. So that gets you some good income. What I prefer to do is to get trade rights with the Reunited Kingdom, and if possible, ally with them in the early game, and they will potentially pay you for it. So that is a pretty good move, in my opinion. The trap option is this. You can see Harondor, the settlement on the island here, is unwalled. It is also owned by the Empire of Harad, and to top it all off, you need it for victory. In addition to the settlements that you own, that you start with, you really only need to get 2, apart from getting 30 altogether. Those 2 are Harondor, which is this, and then Umbar City itself. So from the beginning, the game is telling you, go to war with Harad, and you may think, well, this is easy. I've got a boat, I've got armies potentially ready, and I can just sail right across to the island, take this within a turn or so, and make it mine. And you can do that. The reason I say it's a trap, though, is that in my experience, the Reunited Kingdom is eager to take this as well, pretty much as soon as you get it. So in the campaign that we're going to look at shortly, the Reunited Kingdom has not taken this. Harad still holds it, but I haven't made any moves either, even though I'm at war with Harad. And again, that's because I don't want to just start problems with the Reunited Kingdom until I have to. I'm happy to let Harad hold on to this, build some walls, build up a bunch of stuff that I can either use or tear down when I do eventually take it, and then it'll be easier to defend at that later date. So don't take Harondor early would be my major advice. So what do you do? Well, I would recommend heading for just as soon as you watch this Mumikil army disappear over the horizon. So they are likely to head for Parchareb over here. The AI tends to prefer expanding into rebel settlements first. So you're likely to see Harad go over here with that army, and they're probably also going to try to expand over here, which is going to get them into trouble with Khand and Farharad, most likely. As soon as you see this army get a few turns away from then it's your time to strike. Head down from Rad Harnan, grab and take it with a very strong army. This now becomes the battleground because, again, as we talked about in the Beorning campaign video, the AI pays attention to borders rather than settlements. So even though they could have an army here and just march it through the ford and to take your homelands, in reality what they're going to do is they're going to try to take their city back because that's where the border is. They're going to ignore this until they actually get this province back. Then they'll move for Rad Harnan. So that's what I'd recommend. Take and then from there you're not too far away from this very important settlement, Karenbad. Karenbad, as you can tell from the blue banner, is a chief city. And this means that you are not limited in your building options here. You can build it up completely in terms of military and finances. So you can build your highest level traders, your highest level barracks. So that's a great advantage. The other thing is it starts with stone walls, which again makes it easier to defend. And this area is in a pretty good position for mercenary recruitment options. You have some very good desert mercenaries that I would recommend popping out of your city every now and then to try to enroll. From here, what you've essentially done once you've taken and Karenbad is you've split the empire into 2 parts. One part will be over here, Karas Agar, which tends to be fairly strong. Maybe they've taken Parchareb, maybe they've taken this. But for the most part, they're going to be isolated over here. And then they're going to have all of the west, which is their heartlands of this Umbar region, which comprises basically all of the coastlands here. And a couple of other desert settlements that you can pick off pretty easily. So once you've taken these 2, the next thing I would suggest is just to move along the southern banks of the river, take Akas Anabon, and then try to get to these coastal cities as soon as you can, possibly even using some ships to land some amphibious assaults down there as well. Of course, your big goal in this area is Umbar City, another chief city, very good walls, very well built up, and as soon as you can take this and hold it and grab 1 or 2 of these other coastal cities, you're going to be all set, basically. Because if you have Umbar and, let's say, Habad, and then you've got this, this, and this, Harad is really on the ropes. The trick is going to be defending, when they do build up an army and send it against one of these settlements, you're going to have to be mobile enough to send reinforcements. So let's take a look here. We'll load up my Harondor campaign and take a look at where we are in 375. So this is about, it's it's not too far in, actually. 375. So you start on 356. So a little shy of 40 turns in. All right, so you can see here that essentially what I have done, I do have Umbar at this point. I do have Habad, which is under siege, and I do have Akasanabon, and Karenbad. So this is what I have conquered, and that's it. I've basically held on in the rest of my settlements. So I want to show you a couple of things to watch out for. I would say I'm about a third of the way through the campaign in terms of expansion. I do have 10 settlements, so I'm going to need to get 20 more for victory. But rather than show you the end game, I do want to show you some things to watch out for as you begin to move into the mid game, which is really where I am now. I'm no longer terrified of Harad. They do have some troop training centers, especially this settlement right here, which can be a threat to Umbar and Habad for me. But I do have a field force that is reasonably able to take out these other forces that they're going to send around to trouble me. My next move is probably going to take Karas Nan, maybe Athendad, but this would be more lucrative because it's a coastal settlement. In the east, I'm not terribly concerned. Harad has, again, a large force down here, but I've got some forces in the area, large forces built up at these important settlements. And they do have a big stack in Karas Agar that they seem to be using mostly defensively. Elsewhere, Khand has taken Parchareb. So far, I am trading with them, and I'm just happy to let them have it as long as they don't move over here, which is why I've built watchtowers and I've got a spy. So I'm not too concerned about the east, honestly. Khand can be troubling, but at this point, I've got these cities, and I can train, you know, my third tier archers of Harad to sort of hold off any aggression from them. Similarly, I'm still allied with Far Harad, and they haven't done too much, as you can tell. In fact, they've lost this settlement, so it's a good opportunity for me eventually to sweep down here and claim that valuable incense resource for myself. Ultimately, of course, I want to get all of this, but the problem is, and now I am talking about one of the dangers to watch out for, is I've got a spy up in this area, and so I've been watching this very carefully, watching the progression here. So the Reunited Kingdom is getting the best of Adunabar, it looks like. They've taken Minas Ithil, they've taken the fortress of Caerandros, they've taken Calenhad and Austin Agarlad, and they're besieging some of the forts around Mordor, and they're also besieging Emin Arnon. So the reason that's bad is, as you can imagine, as soon as I share a border with the Reunited Kingdom, we have been allies for a very long time, but I'm concerned that that's going to end. I imagine that as soon as this falls to the United Kingdom, they're going to send a force down here, and I'm going to have a two-front war. So I would love to wrap this up pretty soon by grabbing all of the settlements, at least along the coast, and really containing Harad, possibly over just on the eastern side. But if I can't, what I'm going to have to do is scramble to set some troops to protect from the Reunited Kingdom. Good news about that is if you find yourself fighting against the Reunited Kingdom in the mid-game rather than the early game, the mid-game, they tend to field these lower-tier infantry troops, which, to be honest, are dangerous and are threatening and difficult for you to deal with, but you can manage it. I would certainly need to keep building up troops here, but these types of things, the Harondor footmen that you see here, are essentially your version of this unit, the Kingdom Militia. Very similar in terms of stats, I believe. So 9 attack, 3 charge, 23 defense. Ours are a little lower than that. 8 attack, 2 charge, and 22 defense. That's not much of a difference. So they can pretty much go toe-to-toe with these guys. If you bring some superior tactics to bear, you should be all set. The other thing is you have an advantage in skirmishers fighting the Reunited Kingdom. So train those skirmishers, especially the mounted skirmishers, and you'll be able to get around behind these guys, do all sorts of damage. Even with their archers, your cavalry should be able to see them off. You can train your own archers to watch for that. And of course, your Swords of Harad are going to be quite effective against these units like King's Swordsmen. So we've got a melee attack of 12, defense of 26. Their attack, let's see. Their attack is a bit higher, and their defense is higher, but your secret weapon is that missile attack of 17. So you bring a few units of these guys, and again, I should probably have a couple more. and you'll be able to thin out the ranks of these superior troops. And again, they tend to bring mostly infantry, so your answer to that is cavalry. Bring a few, not too many, don't overload your cav, but bring, let's say I would definitely get a few of these, let's see where they are. Horsemen of the Harnon, with a really good charge bonus, good attack. So these guys are going to be what you want to charge into the flanks of these infantry-heavy armies. So 2 to 4 units of these, and you should be in a pretty good position. I mentioned earlier about mercenaries. Harondor does have mercenaries in its homelands, but they tend to be very expensive. Let's take this guy out here to show you what we have available. This is mercenary Harondor riders, which, as you can tell, are basically a version of your horsemen of the Harnon, and upkeep of 480. So very expensive, but a good unit. I tend to treat those as something you get only when you need it. So I recruited a few of them while I was jumping across the delta here to attack Habad, and I ended up putting them with one of these armies. Where'd they go? Oh, that's right. I sent them down to take Umbar. So that's one potential use for those mercenaries. More interesting mercenaries can be found around here, and that includes these excellent swerting skirmishers. Now, just to look at them, they don't look like much, but they are effective against armor. They've got javelins with a very strong missile attack of 19. They've got a pretty respectable defense of 17 and melee attack of 12. Combat bonus in the deserts, which is kind of where you are around here, and they frighten nearby enemy infantry. So definitely have a few of these in your armies, and your battles with Harad, which tends to field armies of low morale infantry, will go much more smoothly. I also want to point out that agents are quite important here. You can see I've got several spies just stationed around to keep an eye on things, and also to counter these enemy agents. One of the advantages for Harad is assassins, or as we call them in the mod, rogues. And in fact, I should have had a general here in Umbar. I did have a general leading this army, but before he could get there, he was assassinated by this guy. So I ended up having to continue the campaign without a general. So you're going to want your own agents to accompany your armies to attempt to stop that. At any rate, I hope this has been helpful. As I mentioned, Harondor is a difficult faction, but it's not too bad, especially if you act appropriately aggressively early in the game. Take the fight to Harad in a reasonable way, and your economy is not too bad. You can certainly handle everything you need to handle. You just need to watch out how the wars are progressing to your north to make sure you don't get caught in surprise. So, thank you very much for watching, everybody. I'll check you out on the next one. Until then, let me know what you think of this. If you have any other suggestions for any of these guides, I'm always eager to hear them. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.